the uh, the power that Jews have, most Jews don't understand, are not even aware of, and even those who have some connection to that information don't necessarily take it seriously. So the person who made the comment in the comment section is correct. Our function on Earth, in this realm in general, is to serve as, we are God's embassy on Earth. Israel is God's embassy on Earth, not the state of Israel, just Jews in general, and especially when they live on the land of Israel and they fulfill the commandments of the Torah. That's it. That's God's government, the government of the creator of existence. So we have a role to play, in the sense that if we fulfill our role, then we are activating the technology that God gave us to really wield power. That's the only way that Jews are powerful. You know, me and Greg, on our podcast, we read the entire Elders of Zion, the whole thing. We read the whole thing with commentary, everything. It took like maybe like 15 episodes.
I read it. I read
to
it
get to
as
the whole thing with a straight face. We couldn't get through it with a straight face.
Well, we couldn't get it to a straight face because I read it as
That's not why.
Eric Cartman from South Park.
Yeah, he's a cartoon character who was basically
He's
a
an
lampoon.
anti-Semite. Yeah.
He's an he's a ridiculous parody of an anti-Semitic character. Eric Cartman, South Park, very famous cartoon. So Greg does a great impression. He was reading his part. We were taking turns reading the text. He was reading his part in Eric Cartman's voice.
That's right.
Very appropriate. That's right. So in the cartoon, there's a Jewish character too. His name is Kyle Broflovsky, and Eric Cartman, and they live in South Park, Colorado, and they're part of the same group of friends. And Eric is the ridiculous evil anti-Semite, and Kyle is like the annoying Jew, and that's their dynamic. Okay, so I couldn't do an impression, but we read the whole thing. As we were reading it, we realized that the people who are Jew haters, they think that we are God. You see, what Jews don't understand is that they're going to think that we're God one way or the other. As ridiculous, if you should ask your friend or this person did they actually read it? I would wager a lot of money that a lot of people who promote, the ideas, they never actually gone through the text. It's so idiotic. It's beyond idiotic. It's really it's an insult to any average intelligence who goes through this text. It's so bad. You'd wonder, well, what do they think we are? I mean, like, the person who wrote that text feels like we have superpowers, like we really can fly, we can be in multiple places at once. We can all communicate with each other telepathically. We can literally control entire armies just with a thought. Like, that's how ridiculous it is if you actually read the claims. So I think it's very interesting, because when Jews try to, let's say, run away from the religious aspect of their lives, from the spiritual reality of who they are, again and again, God will not allow that to happen. He'll remind us one way or another. The Jew hatred that comes to this world it's a message directly from God, because he's saying to us essentially, oh, you want to be just one of the guys? You're on Earth to be like everyone else? You want to blend in with the nations? You want to be part of the polite company? You want to be, among your colleagues? You want to go to the conferences and be like everyone else? I'm not going to let that happen, because those people, those colleagues of yours, they're going to write a book called The Elders of Zion, and they're those people specifically, right? Like the Germans, who are supposed to be these sophisticated, modern, intellectual, civilized people, right? They're the ones who were the most susceptible to believe everything that the elders of Zion wrote, right, in that book, which means that they essentially saw us, and they've said as much, as a super being, because they looked at themselves as Ubermenschen, right, and connected to Hyperborea and the past ancient civilizations of the Atlantean gods, and so on and so forth. This is what they believed. They also believed us to be of equal power, but on the negative side. So the point being is that God will never allow Jews, as much as we'd like to be regular people. No matter what we want, no matter what we do, we will not be allowed to consider. We're not allowed to even consider ourselves regular people. Every single Jew is supposed to be as Jewy as they possibly can. The Jewier, the better. You know, somebody on Twitter, they were writing that the more you hate us, the Jewisher I get. it's I actually thought that was funny. I usually don't like that stuff, but that was okay. And so the point is that the Torah really has the answer for anti-Semitism. Calling out anti-Semites does nothing, never did, never will, because they're not ashamed of it. They're proud of it, right? The line has been drawn. Once again, it's very clear. People have made their voices heard. It's clear who's coalescing in what camp, right? They make themselves known. Okay. There's a lot of different ways it's manifesting in America. You know, I think the Christian nationalist people who are getting behind the slogans, right, and especially on social media, and others, and the people who support Hamas, right, they're all kind of coalescing. Interesting enough, even you even have Muslims, Hamas supporters, who are saying Christ is king, as a way of like showing that they're part of we're joining your camp, essentially, right? Okay, so again, as a religious sentiment, I'm not against any person saying what they feel as a religious expression. But I guess it depends.
Frank, I'm going to interrupt you back because you've raised one of the most important unsolved questions of my life.
Yeah.
Is this explanation of God's use for us, does that explain the Holocaust? That we brought it?
Nothing explains the Holocaust. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, who I consider to be the greatest of all Torah scholars. I'm not getting into any other claims, just as his level of scholarship, his level of knowledge, and his genius. When he was talking about the subject of the Holocaust, he was very, very critical, and he's not usually very critical. He's very, very critical against any of his colleagues trying to find a purpose that is from some Torah source for the reason for the Holocaust. There's nothing that lines up with what actually happened.
Frank, let me.
No, I just want to tell you, he said that it goes beyond any. We were simply not given the information, because when you look at the reality of the Holocaust and you look at God's statements in the Hebrew Scripture, there is no obvious connection whatsoever. So we have to just understand that it goes beyond anything that we were given.
Well, everything you were saying about God saying, no, you can't be integrated, you can't be a part of their game, you can't basically be them, like them, because you are God's original people who stand up for God. And God punishes people like that. In the Old Testament, he punishes the hell out of the Jews in his own, threatens to. Why isn't there a direct connection? I hate to bring up something so horrific.
No. I'm very glad that you did. I'm very glad that you did, because
it seems to follow logically.
We could call it informed speculation, but when it comes down to it, according to Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I read some of his writing on this, when you see what actually happened to the people in the Holocaust, the reality of it, the details of it, it does not align with anything that God had what you're referring to when you're speaking about the Hebrew scripture, right? There is always
No, I'm referring to you.
no. I'm saying like
Your description of what's expected of Jews and how don't think you can get away with integrating and not being God's people, basically.
right. So
That would make the Nazi Germany thing like the biggest integration ever with probably with the Jews in Nazi Germany, and this was the outcome.
it's many people have observed that, and many people have said, well, that's the reason.
So I've not heard it before. I'm maybe not in enough on on the
I've
Jewish conversations,
yeah,
but I'm
been
sitting here thinking, boy, that sounds right.
Dr. Breggin, Frank, may I say one? I just want to say one quick thing. Dr. Breggin, you know what the problem with all of this is, and I would sit here and like very reluctantly agree with what you're saying, or kind of say, yeah, what you're saying checks out. But here's the problem, and Frank and I have mentioned this on our show. There were so many Torah scholars wiped out. There was so much Torah wiped out in the Holocaust, apart from these people who are, some of them were not even halakhically Jewish, et cetera, et cetera. But then on the other flip side, there's so much Torah, an entire anthology of Torah was wiped out, to the point where if you come to people in the Orthodox world, what have they been doing since the 1950s? To my, Frank and I speak about this all the time without getting in too much into this discussion, to my chagrin, they are, as they attempt to make what's called shidduchim, when they're trying to get people together to get married and have children, their method is just to throw, most of the time, not all the time, to throw something in the wall and see what sticks. Why? Because we have to replenish as fast as possible the people that we lost. We know that we're not going to replenish the Torah that we lost, but we have to replenish the neshamas that we lost, because we're like, at this point, like a chicken with a head cut off in many ways. But if you read the writings of some of these people prior to the Holocaust, and you read actually the writings of one Rabbi Teichtal, who was, I'm just using one example, he was an anti-Zionist rabbi in Hungary, who then flipped his own script and wrote a whole treatise called, the rough translation of is Mother of Glad Children. That means like the land of Israel is the mother of glad children. Saying basically, with sources, backing up with sources and historical in Torah, why we should be in the land of Israel. I don't know about a state, but why we should all go to the land of Israel and live as Jews in the land of Israel. And that was not a popular thing in his community, but he saw what was going on in the Holocaust. He was living in it, and then he died in it. And they found his manuscripts and they turned it into a book. And that's just like what I like to call his book was probably like, I don't want to minimize it or diminish it in any way, but it was kind of like how should I put this? A readable treatise compared to some of the stuff that was written by these scholars who were obliterated. And so when you think about that, and then you try to line it up with what some people say and what you're trying to bring to the surface, it doesn't make sense. If it was just the people who assimilated, maybe we could have that discussion. But why would God want to eliminate all that Torah, those well springs of Torah, to the point where our entire shidduch system, to the point of like people like myself who didn't grow up religious, have to quote unquote suffer from these methods and these whatever. Again, I'm not going to go into it. Frank doesn't like it. So that's my 2 cents on that.
But this gets us into
Yeah.
the whole question of why God would do anything.
right. So I'd like to be.
Wait a minute.
I didn't have a chance to respond to the initial. I don't feel like I don't feel like I was given.
All right,
fair.
go ahead.
So what Greg is saying is that the truth is that in World War II, 95% of Torah institutions and scholarship were wiped off the face of the earth. That's not an exaggeration. 95%.
That's amazing. I didn't know this.
Yeah.
I learn all the time with you guys.
The most pious people and the greatest of all scholars were wiped away, and so it makes absolutely it doesn't line up with any of the statements that God has made in the scripture about what would happen if we behave in such and such a way, which, by the way, are always it's never, here's what I'm going to do to you if you don't do what I like. That's never the case. The actual communication is, I've programmed the world to work in such a way that if you don't maintain these particular spiritual gears, let's say, that I put you in, the system collapse, and the result is the following. That's God is saying, here's how this machine works. And he does not interfere with the workings of his machine. I'm not sticking up for God, by the way. I'm just saying that that's actually, the nuance matters. I mean, it's different. It's not like saying, I'm going to beat the hell out of you if you don't do it. It's a little bit different. It's basically, he gave us, he stuck us in a world where we have to be 100% conscientious of everything that we do, because everything that we do affects the stability of this reality. And between you and me, Dr. Breggin, I'm not a fan of that idea personally, but it's a little different than I'm gonna wipe you out because I don't like you. Because in the translation, when you read the translations of the Torah, that's what it sounds like, because there is no such thing as a translation of the Torah. But so my point is that there are some things that have occurred that if you study the Torah and you see God's statements and then you see what actually happened, they don't line up. Meaning, it doesn't explain. You can't use God's statements in the Torah to explain a certain thing that we've seen, namely the Holocaust is the best example of that. Now, yes, there were elements of we were derelict in our duty, and we did this and we did that. Yeah. That's true. But the promises that God made as to what the results would be if we behave that way do not line up with the Holocaust. Okay. So that is that's a separate, it's a very, very separate discussion, but especially the Holocaust, because there's a lot of things to look at in that respect. But there is something that there's a Torah truth, a concept, and a formula really, which is the following. There's a law, we have a Jewish law that says Esav hates Yaakov. Esav is the twin brother of Jacob. In the Torah, in Torah thought and Torah scholarship, Esav is the father of Western civilization, father of Edom, Rome, which evolved into Christianity and then moved towards Western civilization. Esav has three very recognizable character traits. Okay. We have Esav, and that's all based on his behavior in the text of the Torah. So we have Esav the liar, we have Esav the arrogant, and then we have Esav the seeker of pleasure. Two of those characteristics are extremely negative. And we have prophecies in the Hebrew scripture that those aspects of Esav will be eradicated. But Esav the pleasure seeker is the good aspect of our twin brother Esav, because pleasure is a character trait which can be used to serve God. Pleasure is something that can be used to serve God. Arrogance and deceit cannot. Okay, so this is symbolic language, obviously, but there's another cosmic rule. Like I started out saying that Esav hates Yaakov, but Esav loves Yisrael. So Jacob represents Israel, or the Jewish people, or the Israelite people, in its unrealized potential. Because it says in the text of the Hebrew scripture, Esav was a man of the field. He was a hunter, which we understand as that he hunted people with his mouth. He hunted people with his ability to speak to them, to convince them. If you want to understand what Esav was really like, that lawyer who represented the German Nazis in the trial of Nuremberg was a little glimpse of what he was really like. But Esav was much, much more prolific. He was truly powerful, truly powerful. Okay, and that power was meant to serve God. Something went wrong with him along the way, but what Jacob was described as a man of simplicity who sat in the tents. He was pure, meaning there was no guile to him at all. There was nothing. He just literally was just pure and angelic, sat in the tents and studied Torah. Otherwise, they were twins. So in some sense, you could see that Esav looked at his brother as like this, they were twins, but Esav was the firstborn. And he looked at his brother as kind of like, we would say, a mama's boy or something like that, who kind of like just hung out at home. And Esav was out in the field, busting his rump, and Jacob was back at home, just being babied and whatever. I'm just trying to translate it to our terms. So if anybody's familiar with the story of Jacob and his brother Esav, you understand that there was some conflict, and Jacob received the blessing instead of Esav for good reason. Esav vowed to kill his brother. He hated him, and then Jacob took on the role that Esav was supposed to take on, and he went to his uncle Lavan, who represented Satan and all the problems of the world. It was that he was the lowest, most evil man on earth. Jacob had to go and rectify his uncle Laban and transform Laban and his property and his people into something godly. That's what Esav was supposed to do. But Jacob went. When Jacob came back from Laban, his brother Esav came to intercept him, planning on murdering him and everybody who was with him. But when he saw Jacob, something changed. He was affected. He saw that Jacob had reached his potential and become Israel. Right before that, Jacob had wrestled with the angel, and the angel named him Israel. It says that in the text. Okay, so when Esav saw his brother, they embraced. It says that in the text of in the verses, right? And it was a true embrace. There was a moment of true brotherly love there, and it was reconciliation. And so that's what the pattern is for all of Jacob's descendants and all of Esav's descendants. Okay, so the answer to anti-Semitism is not calling them out, but just being as Jewy as we possibly can, to do our duty in following the commandments. And again, I'm not speaking from some pedestal. I have more work to do than everybody here on this panel. Okay, that's just a fact. But that's what we have to do. Study the Torah, follow the commandments, and do it outwardly and with much confidence as humanly possible. That's the answer to anti-Semitism, because the programmer, that's the creator, God, right? Everything that we see here is a result of his programming. So we have to appeal to the programmer rather than to what we see here with us, which is just a result of what the programmer does. So the more commandments that we follow, the more Torah that we study, the better example that we are for the people around us. Really, that is the answer to Jew hatred. That's the answer to Esav loves Israel, but he hates Jacob. Jacob is, he's kind of like he's not as confident. He's a little insecure. He's in the tent. He's in the tent. He's kind of like, but we have to embrace our role as employees in God's embassy in this realm.